Slopes of lines here. With slopes of lines, there's two cases. Two intersecting lines can be. They can be parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay. We're going to talk about how to identify which one's which. So remember, we have this thing called slope formula. What slope formula is? It says if you have the slope, we call that the variable m. Remember, it's the second y minus the first divided by the second x minus the first. We call that slope formula, right? Remember these things? Okay, these are not exponents. Like exponents are up in the top. What do we call these things? Remember? Subscripts. Yeah, subscripts. Remember, subscripts have no mathematical meaning. They're just there to say this is the second y coordinate, this is the first y coordinate, this is the second x, this is the first x. If you have two sets of points, an x1, y1, and x2, y2, you do this formula, you can find the slope between the two. Okay. Do this formula, you find the slope between the two. We call that slope formula. Okay. y2 minus y1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So if we want to find the slope of a line, we can do it one of two ways. Okay, it's doing the same thing both ways. One is the rise divided by the run method, or rise over run. Okay, or we can use the slope formula. Let's say if we were going to use the slope formula, again, this is the slope formula, second y minus the first divided by the second x minus the first. If we call this, it doesn't matter which pair of points we pick is the x and the y. Okay, but if we call this x1, this has to be y1. If we call this x2, that has to be y2. Okay, so this says I take the second y minus the first, 7 minus negative 1, divided by the second x minus the first. And remember, when you have a double negative, what should you do to that? Add it. You're right. 7 plus 1 is 8. Double negative there. Negative 3 plus 1, negative 2. And 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. Okay, that's the slope of this line. Another way you can do it is you can just pick 2 points on the line, which I already went ahead and picked these 2 points, and you do how much you go up or down divided by how much you go left or right. So let's say I'm going from this point to this point. I'm going to go down, that's 8 units, so that's a negative 8, and to the right, 2 units, so that's positive 2. I do rise over run, that still gives me negative 4. Say, good question. Same thing if I went the other way. If you went here, you would go up 8 units, and you would go to the left 2 units. Because you went to the left, that's negative. 8 divided by negative 2, also negative 4. Okay. So it doesn't matter which 2 points you pick and go from, but you do how much you rise, or go down, divided by how much you run, go left to right. If you go to the left, it's negative. If you go down, it's negative. Okay. Doesn't matter which point you pick. I also could have picked this point and this point. I would have went down 4 and to the right 1. Negative 4 over 1 is negative 4. You should get the same slope either way. Okay. So there's 3 ways we can find slope given a line. How about a vertical line? When you have a line that's straight up and down, this one happens to go through the y-axis. What's the slope of a vertical line?
0, 0.
Now, there's 2 options. Most people either say 0 or they say undefined. One of them is for a vertical line. One of them is for a horizontal line. Which one's which?
Undefined.
Vertical is undefined. The way I personally remember it is if you have a flat surface, it takes 0 effort to walk across a flat surface, and it's impossible, or you can't define how to walk up a vertical surface, right? 0 effort to walk across a flat surface, undefined, vertical. This slope of this line is undefined. It's not able to be defined. It does not have a slope. It's not 0, because the slope of a flat line is 0. Vertical line is undefined. Horizontal line is 0. Okay. So in this case, I want you to think in your head here, what would be the slope of this line? Now also think, if we look from left to right, it goes uphill. If it goes uphill, is it positive slope or negative slope? Positive. So I know the slope of this should be positive. If I just want to pick 2 points on this line, it already picked these 2 points for me. You could pick those 2 points or do 2 different ones. Okay. But if I pick these 2 points, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's positive. I go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's rise over run. I can't simplify that. That's my slope, 7 over 8. I could have done the same thing this way. I could have went down 8 and to the left 7. Yeah, sorry, down 7 to the left 8. I said that wrong. Down 7 to the left 8. Negative 7 over negative 8. Negative divided by negative. Positive. Yes.
How do you know if the slope is positive or negative?
Slope is positive if the line, if you look at it going from left to right, if it's going uphill, it's going to be a positive slope. If it's going downhill, it's going to be a negative slope. Uphill is positive, downhill is negative. Okay. Flat line is 0. Vertical line is undefined. Okay. So what's the slope of this line without doing any calculations? 0. Flat line, 0 slope. Okay. Again, just more here. Slope from one point to another. Down 3 to the right 5. So it's going to be negative 3/5. Okay. Remember that negative, you can treat it with either the numerator or the denominator, just not both. So you could go down 3 and to the right 5. That's from here to here. Or you could go up 3 and to the left 5. Okay. You just can't take that negative with both the numerator and denominator, or else that makes it positive. Right? Negative over negative is positive. Okay. Slope of this one?
0.
Good. Just test this. That one's 0. Flat line 0. Okay. Slope here again. Last one. If I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 1, 2, 3, it's positive. It's going uphill, so it's 6 over 3. So the slope is 2. Okay. Slope of this one?
Undefined.
Good, undefined. Just had to mix those in there to see we remember. Vertical is undefined, horizontal line 0. Okay. What I want you to do right now is get out your book and turn to page 158. We're going to do a little activity. Memorize those rules because they're on your postulate sheet that you're going to get for chapter 3. I don't have it copied off today, but the first couple postulates from chapter 3 are called parallel and perpendicular lines. It says if two non-vertical lines have the same slope, if and only if they're parallel. Okay. Two non-vertical lines. So this means if they're parallel, they have the same slope. If they have the same slope, then they're parallel. These are on your postulate sheet that you'll get. Okay. Also, just be aware the postulate 3.3, when it says they're perpendicular, it says their product, which product means what type of problem? Multiplication. Their product is negative 1. Meaning, if you had one slope is 2/3, the perpendicular slope is negative 3/2. If you multiply those together, you get negative 6 over 6, which is negative 1. So having a product of negative 1 is the same thing as being opposite reciprocal. Okay? Negative reciprocal. So for example, I promise you this is a quiz question on the very next quiz we take. Okay? Almost, it is word for word, just the numbers are changed. It says if you have two lines F and G and H and J, tell me if those are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So I'm looking at F and G and HJ, and I want to know, are those two lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Okay. Well, first I need to find out what the slopes of each of these two are, and then compare their slopes and see what type of relationship they have. So if I look at the first set, F and G, if I call this my first X, my first Y, and my second X, and my second Y, I'm going to plug these into the slope formula, which it says take your second Y minus your first, divided by the second X minus the first. This double negative becomes a plus. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. So the slope of FG is negative 2/3. I then want to find what is the slope of HJ. Call that my first X, my first Y. The second X, the second Y. And I plug those into my formula. Take the second Y minus the first, divided by the second X minus the first. 3 minus 0 is 3. 6 minus 5 is 1. That is the slope, which simplifies to 3, is the slope of HJ. So are these two lines, are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither? They're neither. Because to be parallel, they'd have to have the same slope. To be perpendicular, they'd have to have negative reciprocals. Okay. They have neither, So they are neither parallel or perpendicular. They probably cross at some other angle.
So parallel has to have the same.
Parallel has to have the same, and perpendicular has to have opposite reciprocals. Yep. You could graph them. Yeah, you could graph them. The only problem is they could intersect at like an 89-degree angle. And then it's hard to tell, is it parallel or perpendicular? Okay. But a graph, you could visually put it on a graph and see where they intersect also. But comparing their slopes is the most accurate way. Okay. So I want you to, on a scratch sheet of paper, try this one. Tell me, are FG and HJ parallel, perpendicular, or neither? I'll give you a couple minutes to try that. So hopefully you set it up to look something like this. -3 minus 2, you get -5 over 2. When you do the other one, you get 5 over -2. So are they parallel, perpendicular, neither? They're parallel. The same slope. Just because the negative here is in the numerator and the negative here is in the denominator, it's the same thing. Right? There's just one negative in the division problem. Yes. Quiz. End of next week. So if I have graphed the line that goes through 5, 1 and is parallel with this MN that goes through those points. So if I have this graph, I want it to go through 5, 1. So I'm going to go to 5, 1 on my coordinate plane and put a point. I want it to go through that point, and I want it to be parallel to MN, which goes through -2, 4. It's going to be somewhere about here, and 2, 1 somewhere about here. Well, I need to know what's the slope of this line, because in order to be parallel to this line, it has to have the same slope. So I need to find the slope between M and N. x1, y1, x2, y2, 1 minus 4 over 2 minus -2, -3 over 4. I need it to have a slope of -3 over 4. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this point, and I'm going to go down 3 and to the right 4. And it would be somewhere about here, and draw that line. So that's just testing to make sure you know with parallel they have to have the same slope. Perpendicular would be the opposite reciprocal.
How did you get that second point?
Okay. This second point I went down 3 and to the right 4. Okay. Went down 3 to the right 4 because I had to have the same slope, which is parallel.
Mr. Noel?
Yes.
Okay, so the black, do you have to like do slope formula?
I had to do the slope formula first to figure out what the slope was.
Oh, okay. Well, like, do you have to do it like 5, 1 and then?
No, because I just went from this point. Went down 3 and 4, so I know this has a slope of -3/4 too. Yeah.
I don't. Okay.